down the ladder now. I'm at the foot of the ladder. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
56 years ago, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon, with over 500 million people watching. This historic event marked the peak of a fierce Cold War era contest we call the space race. But how did it all begin?
Today, at Cuxhaven, the V-2 is still being fired by Germans, but this time directed by British pilots.
Before satellites or astronauts, World War II saw the birth of rocket tech. On June 20th, 1944, Nazi Germany's V-2 rocket, led by Wernher von Braun, became the first man-made object to reach space, hitting 175 kilometers altitude. After the war, both the US and USSR scrambled to recruit German scientists to their sides. The US launched Operation Paperclip, appointing Wernher von Braun as their leading space program engineer, while the Soviets responded with Operation Osavoyakim, putting Ukrainian-born Sergei Korolev in charge. This race for German talent helped kickstart spaceflight and eventually the space race. In 1955, the US announced it would launch the first artificial satellite into space. But on October 4th, 1957, the Soviets beat them to it with Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite on the R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile, which would later be succeeded by the Soyuz and Vostok rockets. A month later, Sputnik 2 carried a dog called Laika, the first animal in space, although unfortunately she died in space after the cabin overheated. The Sputnik mission stunned the US and triggered the Sputnik crisis, exposing a major gap in technology that terrified the West. In response, von Braun was tasked to build America's first satellite, and in short time. Just 3 months later, on February 1st, 1958, the Explorer 1 satellite was launched on a Jupiter C rocket, marking America's official entry into the space race. Later in the year, the US decided that its space program would have to be centralized under a single private government body. On October 1st, 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, was founded, replacing the former National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. The Soviets kept their advantage, as on the 13th of September 1959, Luna 2 became the first human-made object to touch the surface of another celestial body, the Moon. It was followed by Luna 3 on October 6th, which captured the first photos of the Moon's far side. After beating the Americans to the Moon, the Soviets delivered a knockout blow on April 12, 1961, when Yuri Gagarin, aboard Vostok 1, became the first human in space, orbiting Earth once and landing safely. This was a massive Soviet victory, both politically and technologically, that shocked the entire world. The US rushed to catch up after being humiliated, witnessing the Soviet success. Just weeks after Gagarin, Alan Shepard, on board the Mercury Redstone 3 rocket, Freedom 7, became the first American in space, with a suborbital flight in May 1961. The following year, on February 20th, 1962, John Glenn became the first American to fully orbit Earth and return safely. But President Kennedy had bigger plans. In a bold speech to Congress, he announced America's goal: landing a man on the Moon and returning him safely before the decade is out, mobilizing billions in funding and the nation's best minds.
We choose to go to the Moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Both superpowers pushed the boundaries of spaceflight in the 60s. The Soviets achieved the first multi-crew flight with Voskhod 1, and in 1965, Alexei Leonov completed the first spacewalk during the Voskhod 2 mission. On the other hand, America focused on the Gemini program, intended to develop new spaceflight capabilities that would pave the way for the moon landing, such as rendezvous, docking, EVA, and long-duration flights. Meanwhile, the USSR's Luna 9 achieved the first soft moon landing in 1966, sending photos from the surface. By 1968, both nations were racing towards the moon. America's Apollo 8 became the first mission to orbit the moon with humans on board, a crucial test before the landing attempt. Then came July 20th, 1969. Apollo 11 touched down on the surface of the moon, and Neil Armstrong took that first historic step. After a decade of rivalry, the US had won the space race, or at least according to the Western portrayal. Critics argued that the USSR achieved much more in the greater scene of the space race, while the US's only major victory being considered the moon landing. After 1969, the focus shifted from competition to cooperation. The 1975 Apollo-Soyuz mission symbolized détente and peace as American and Soviet spacecraft docked together in orbit, marking the end of the space race era. As the US and Soviets collaborated, other nations such as Japan and those in Europe including Germany, France, the UK and Italy were intrigued by the space industry and focused on developing their own independent rocket and satellite technology. This led to the creation of the European Space Agency in 1975. After the dissolution of the USSR in 1991, the space agency rebranded to Roscosmos. This further eased diplomatic tensions, and from 1998 to 2011, Roscosmos, NASA, and the ESA worked together to construct the world's largest space station, the International Space Station, still used for missions today. With the passing of the 20th century, the space industry began slowly shifting towards privatization, as we see with companies like SpaceX now. In the modern day, other countries like the People's Republic of China and India have also matured their spaceflight capabilities, and now we have set our sights back onto the moon and beyond. The truth is, the space race never ended, it just went global.